Tell me when. Hi everyone, welcome to the Google Hangout with Vota Latino, Mi Familia Vota, and Cosmo Latina. We are excited because today we are in the process of talking about the Latino vote 2014, the midterm elections, and why it matters. And we want to remind everybody that some very important voter registration deadlines just passed over the weekend. And we have some very important ones coming up today, which include Texas, Florida, and I'm missing one. Ben, what's the other one that's coming on today?
That is Arizona.
And Arizona, all three very important ones where they have been the hotbed of political activism, action, and I believe singling where we're going to be moving forward as a country. Joining us today, we have Ben Monterrosa. Ben is with Mi Familia Vota and has dedicated his life to promoting the Latino vote at the grassroots level. He got his feet wet with Proposition 187 back in California, and for those who are just joining us, Proposition 187 was the very first time that there was a piece of legislation that condoned racial profiling, saying that it was for immigration reform. Unfortunately, it became the blueprint close to 15 years later for the Arizona law, SB 1070, and we all know how that turned out for Californians. For the folks that promoted it, it didn't turn out so well, huh, Ben?
Not at all. I mean, we were able to show that it was a short-term gain with the long-term consequences for political candidates who wanted to use the issue of immigration as a way to get elected.
Thank you for joining us, Ben. Also joining us is Cosmo Latina's one and only, Michelle Milligan. Thank you so much for joining us today, Michelle.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for including me.
And I want to thank you because before we get started, Cosmo has played such an important role in this for the very first time, this voter registration effort that we're looking to do across, not only across industries, but also across communities. And you were one of the first people, Michelle, when I called you, that not only did you say, yes, let's do it, but you went a bit further. So why is Cosmo participating this time around?
Well, for Cosmo, especially for Cosmo and Cosmo for Latinas, voting as a woman and as a Latina woman is my top priority right now. It's our top priority because if we don't stand up for issues that matter to us, like reproductive rights, like immigration reform, we literally don't get a seat at the table. So it's my #1 priority.
And thank you for participating. So, folks, for the folks that are just tuning in, for the next 30 minutes, we are going to talk about the importance of the Latino vote, talk a little about what does it mean to be a Latino and to participate in the electoral process, and finally, what is it that we need to do to flex our political muscle, and why is it so important? So, Ben, with the first question, why is it important for Latinos to participate?
This is the only time that I believe that the rich and the poor get to say their say. And that is, to me, it is one vote can make a big difference for our community. So I want to make sure that our community understands that this issue of civic engagement is one of the issues that I think we are doing better every single election, but we can do best if we continue participating. This is the way that we're going to make sure that elected officials pay attention to our community and to our community issues.
So for someone who's not in the political process, Michelle, what is the #1 reason that Latinos should register and vote?
Well, you know, I'm glad that you asked that question because we do face a lot of readers and just girls who are like, why should I vote? What difference does it make? And people always, you know, talk about us, but they don't really seem to do anything. And the reason why is that when we don't speak up, we don't become a priority as voters. A lot of people don't realize that politicians literally will judge the value of a community based on our participation. And they look at different demographics, whether they're ethnically or age groups, and they think, we're going to put the issues of this community #1, #2, and #3. And when only 49% of Latinos are voting, even though we're 16, 17% of the country, we've become a low priority community from a political perspective.
And I love like what you say is that politicians are going to pay attention to us if we participate, but otherwise what you're saying is if we don't, we're going to be left out the wayside. Ben, when you hear so much about why are the do's and don'ts of voter registration, the do's and don'ts of political participation, oftentimes the Latino community gets put together as just one voting block. Can you talk about that and maybe dispel those myths?
Well, I mean, quite frankly, our community is more complex than people can give us, but at the same time, it's easy to work with our community if you approach our community with dignity and respect. Mm-hmm. So number one, I think that is this notion, one is most of the Latinos don't vote, then for why bother? And I would say we need to figure out, number one, our community is a unique position. Number one, we have older generations in this country who have been assimilated. We have the young generations that are coming up to age of voting, and that is one thing. The Latino community is a very young population. And number two, we have some of those who became citizens by choice, not by born. And so we need to make sure that we take those three into account. And on top of that, as I'm not the best prepared, we have somebody here, including yourself, Maria Teresa, but the issue of having the women in our community to participate, I think it is something that we need to value more than in any other community. In my house, my wife tells my kids or myself to do something, we normally get it done. So I just basically feel that our community is not only young, but it's our community that we need to figure out how to approach. And I will say that we have not paid much attention to our community in general and to women in our community in specific.
Yeah, I want to touch upon that. I think that, Ben, that you state something most folks don't realize, but the number one voters within the 2012 electorate in the Latino community were Young Latinas.
Exactly.
Michelle, talk a little about that. How is getting through the heart of Young Latinas the gateway to political empowerment for the community, but also for politicians?
Well, I think the Young Latina is the next sort of, for lack of a better term, suburban soccer mom of the 1990s, in the sense that this is the heart of the country right now. The median age of Latinas in this country is 26, 27 years old, and we are the ones in the household. A recent survey showed that we're the leaders of our household. As Ben was alluding to, the Young Latina is becoming the new matriarch. She's telling her mother, her grandmother, everybody else in the family whom to vote for. But there's a lot of really big issues at stake for the Young Latina, whether it's health care for her family, her own reproductive rights, immigration reform, or even breaking the glass ceiling, getting engaged in technology. There's a lot of really important issues that are affecting every young girl's life right now, and now's the time for us to stand up and really be counted as a community. So I think that from a politician's perspective, though, they aren't talking to us. There's a very antiquated idea of who Latina women are. Sometimes there's this assumption that we don't even speak English or even participating in the business community, or that we're all, frankly, mothers are interested only in our families, when our family dynamic is much more dynamic than that. We're really thinking about our entire extended families, and we're really well educated. And I think the more nuance from politicians and more straight talk to us would really serve them well.
Well, and I think, Michelle, what you just mentioned is absolutely right. The average American is roughly 42, 43 years old, whereas the average Latino is 27. So when you're talking about getting into the heart of the Latino community and talking to a lot of these young women, they also happen to be the average age of the average Latino voter. So these are young women that are about to go to school or probably starting their first job. So they have a lot of ambition, and if you talk to them about the issues that they care about, you mentioned small business, you mentioned education, you mentioned healthcare, they're all at the very prime of their life when a lot of these issues are directly impacting them. Isn't that the case?
Absolutely. I mean, it's definitely the case. I think that people don't realize how high the college enrollment level is for young Latinas and how hungry we are. I mean, our number one search terms on the internet are healthcare, and a lot of people don't even realize that. From a consumer perspective, I really see the business numbers, right, because I talk to advertisers every day, and I see how we consume, which shows what is at the heart of what we're interested in. We're very interested in our own personal health and our family's health, and we're very interested in business and money. We did a reader survey recently, and you know what? The number one thing our readers wanted more of was not relationships and sex.
What was it then?
It wasn't. It was.
What was it then?
Career empowerment information. That's what our readers wanted across the board, and I see Ben nodding there. So this resonates. All of our young readers want to know, how can I get ahead? How can I get to the next place in my life? How can I get my family healthier? And how can I learn more? Guess what? The second thing they wanted to learn more about was politics.
Huh.
That's why we did this politics issue with Rosario here. You can see behind me. Let me give her more play here. That's why I partnered with you, Maria Teresa, because my readers want to know, how can I participate more so I don't see my needs and the needs of my community shunted aside? And that's not just a talking point. That's from reader data from my own readers. So.
Well, and I think, Ben, what Michelle talks about is that the number one search term for Latinos is they search on health issues. We have 3 big areas of election coming up. We have it in Texas, Arizona, and Colorado, where the issue of women's health is really is become a real driving force in the battle for the voter. Can you talk a little bit about that? What you're seeing?
Well, I mean, I just want to follow up also in terms of like the key role that the women played in our community, and that unfortunately the little attention that is being played by elected officials, one of the elected officials, that is candidates and political parties, that they're not approaching us in a proper way. So I would say that not only for the women's point of view, but also for the Latinos' point of view. And I think that the issues of women's rights, women's ability to move up and the ladder, as well as the Latinos, we only have one choice here, that is to participate. Because, I mean, Michelle put it very well. I mean, they're only going to pay attention to us if we participate. And what we have seen over and over again is not an information and invitation to participate. It's disinformation, discouragement. Hopefully we don't participate. So it's our job to make sure that we, together, we give the people the information that they need, the invitation that they need, so we can participate. I mean, I see that throughout across the United States, and specifically in key states where we are trying to get with our community. Very few times we see a real reaching to our community in a respectful way, not bilingual, but by culture, understanding who we are. Bilingual does help, but a few words English and Spanish is not going to get us to get the individuals to understand what we want to do. So don't talk to us, talk with us.
Right.
So that
well,
way
I think you're talking about respect, and how do candidates talk about how do they respect the Latino voter? And with that, Ben, what is Mi Familia Vota doing? You guys are across the map, talking, engaging, doing the hard work of knocking on doors, trying to change the hearts and minds of Latinos to participate. Talk a little bit about what you did over the weekend, what folks can expect moving forward from Mi Familia Vota and your work.
Well, let me just say what we did over the weekend, and thank you for that question, because it's not only what we did over the weekend, but what we have been doing together. Number one, we want to make sure that we partner with organizations that are mindful of how do we talk to our community. That is why I'm happy to be partnered up with Vota Latino and making sure that we're not only going to get the online, but the ground, not only the English-speaking Latinos, but the Spanish-speaking Latinos. There's a lot of work that is being happening with the Spanish media that often goes unnoticed by the mainstream media. So what we have done, not only over the years, but what we have done, inclusive this last weekend, is we make sure that we went to the high schools, because we know that the high schools, we have a lot of youth that are becoming of age, so we want to make sure that they get registered to vote. We have covered several of the main Latino festivals that exist. We have done phone banking with the Spanish media to make sure that the people get the information. People get to be calling us. We have one more today in Arizona, where people are going to be calling us. We are planning to do one in Colorado, because next weekend will be the last weekend in Colorado, to people get registered to vote. So we partner with the Spanish media. We definitely work with a lot of youth to ensure that they are talking to our community. And main thing, we do it bilingual. So we knock on somebody's door, and the person feels most comfortable in Spanish. We definitely los hablamos en español, and then if they want to be more in English, we do it in English. That is the one thing that I feel very proud of, it is that the operations of Mi Familia Vota is 100% Latino, bilingual, young men and women helping us to move this issue of engaging that community.
And Michelle, Ben really talks about the importance of being bilingual and bicultural and being sensitive to the Latino voter, that it's not enough just to talk to someone, but really incorporate it into conversation. Cosmo does that very well. What are some of the best practices for folks that they keep scratching their heads about how to engage the Latino voter, a Latino audience? what can you tell them? What advice can you share with them?
Well, I would say, I mean, it's really just about the issues. It's not, I think like Spanglish and, Spanish language sort of pandering is really becoming out of style. I feel like even we do use, Spanish words in the copy, but it's usually when it evokes an emotional response with our reader. We talk about kind of like, a flor de Maria or something like that, or just certain phrases that we remember in Spanish. But what we really try to do to talk to our readers is talk to them about the issues that come out of their lives, that really come out of their experiences every day. I mean, family, I always rattle off statistics that I know you guys all know, but I'm not sure.
No, but share them, because I think
I'm not sure if everybody knows it. For example, a survey was done of Young Latinas and what their priorities were, and the number one, nobody's going to be shocked by this one, it's in the name of some of these organizations, Familia, right? Familia is number one. But I was surprised by number 2 and 3. Number 2 was community, like relationships. And number 3 was friendship. So it's relationships, and relationships are our priorities. Career came in at number 4. So that just goes to show it's radically different, right, from the mainstream community. I think number 1 was career, and I think 2, 3, and 4, and 5 were 2. But I feel like what a lot of people don't get is that we are very, very concerned about the state of our communities and our families right now. And we have very specific needs, and we want to learn how to buy our first home. We want to learn how to save our money. We want to learn all the things that people take for granted, our basic knowledge, because a lot of our families came from other countries and didn't know this kind of information. So how we can break into, get into college and break into an industry, for example, step-by-step help in the community is really how to connect with our readers. I mean, I'm sorry, our voters. I'm used to saying readers, but voters or our community in general. I think doing service and speaking directly goes a long way, and acknowledging leaders in our community goes a lot further than speaking in Espanol, for example.
Well, I think that's right, and I think that you mentioned something that I think provides us a uniqueness about the Latino community, and we like to do everything in packs. My husband always jokes that I will walk with anyone to their car, even though I may be going in the opposite direction, but just like to have that extra time with someone. But I think that it also speaks that we should be also encouraging our friends and family to register and vote, and to vote together as a family and as a community. And Ben, that's basically what you've been talking about when you say that you go door knocking and you encourage people you speak to them in Spanish, but also speak to them in English, recognizing that commonality, that thread that we share as prideful Latinos is the fact that we are responsible for our community. How has your work changed in the last 10, 15 years that you've been doing this work? Because I imagine that the thread of getting people to register and to vote as a community is still the same, but how has the nature of the work changed?
I think it has been improved. I just want to say this, as much as we have a lot more work to be done, it has been improved, because finally it looks like all of us, there are organizations that have been doing this for some time, and organizations that were not in existence when I was doing 1994, when the 187 campaign, and the knowledge about how important the Latino community was in the recognition that we need to figure out how to talk to them and how to address that in a different way. I mean, I'm come from an era where 2 people were put in a experiment, and that those 2 people were the ones who determined how the rest of the community looks like. And right now we have research being done with Latinos, Latinas, bilingual, you name it, geared to our community to try to get it.
Oh no, you muted him, guys. 1 second, Ben. 1 second, Ben. Can you go ahead and start talking? Ben, Yandari, he's been muted. Can you unmute him? Okay. We are having technical difficulties on the web, so please bear with us, Ben. Michelle, he was talking about how things have changed. So while we get Ben back on board, do you want to talk a little bit about how it's changed for you? And something that you also mentioned, Michelle, that I think was important was, how do we get more young people involved? They are oftentimes seen as being under-resourced with information when it comes to their careers, when it comes to finding their path here in America. But at the same time, not only are they under-resourced, a lot of expectations are placed on their shoulders. So how do you converge the two, one? And two, how do you make them translate that and realize that all the roads lead back to participating?
How do I jump on?
I think that's a really great question, Maria, because I feel like when I go, I'm always stunned when I go to colleges, which I do on a very regular basis, and talk to, 600, 1,000 different groups of Latinas, and seeing that they are so hungry for really basic information, like, should I move away to try to get a job, or what is maybe a good field that I should even be in? I mean, so sometimes it can be a very sheltered experience to be a Latina girl growing up here, because you're so encased in your own community. So I think what is changing is that we are very mobile and we have a lot of information, but maybe we need context and organizing around that information. I feel like sometimes to engage somebody politically, I think, is to tell them the information that we're talking about right now. Like, a lot of people don't know that if you don't vote, literally resources will be taken away from your community. They think it's just, hey, I don't believe in the two candidates that I see here. I don't like any of them. I don't trust them, so I'm not going to vote. People don't realize you make that decision, and bigger decisions are made about you and where you live and your block that you live on. And that's like those kind of things really make people think more, or maybe they don't even know what stances their politicians have or how many elections there are besides the presidential one. So I think like a lot of information is important, and going to where people are, like going to community centers and going to colleges and getting people involved in a bigger way around the political process, and not just on voting day, to me seems to be really important.
Yeah, and I think Ben, we have you back, but I think that what Michelle is saying is that how do we connect that all roads lead to voting? So sometimes people say, well, I don't have the best school system. Well, that's very much connected to, did you participate in the last election? Can you talk a little bit about that, Ben?
Yes, let me just first say that the issues of...
And welcome back.
I'm glad to be back. I never left. I would keep watching.
I know.
Well, bottom line is, I mean, a lot of people need to understand that the issues that are in play every time that we choose not to elect is we are letting people to elect others for us. And the issue of education, good jobs, healthcare, and immigration, we are placing those issues and the people that we elect. Those people will make decisions based on who elected them, and if we were not playing part of electing them, they're not going to pay attention to it. So I just think that the issue of education is very dear to our hearts and the Latino community. We all know that in order for us to be successful, our kids' best chance is to continue going to school. But what we notice is that issue of education is an issue that very seldom gets to be placed on top of the agenda in a way that it can help us. The same thing with healthcare, and the same thing with good jobs. And why not to talk about the issue of immigration, which may not be the first issue on the voters' mind, but it's definitely an issue that will define which candidate we're going to support. And as you said earlier, is defined about who respects us the best, who talks to us in a much better way, who is understanding of our community. Because the other part that we cannot forget is a good percentage, up to the 80% of our community, live within a mixed families, i.e. somebody is undocumented, somebody is on legal status, or very minimum we know somebody that may need this issue being resolved. So that is how we feel that when we talk to our community, they understand why the importance of voting. So if you haven't voted because you think that it's nothing to stay for you, if you haven't voted because the candidate that you choose last time didn't do what he or she's supposed to be doing it, that is not a good reason enough not to continue voting. That is only a reason to say we need to get ourselves to continue voting and get others to vote in order for us to be paying attention to.
And I think, Ben, what you just said is very true. We look at the Latino community, and we have been, one of the many issues on the table for us is immigration reform, and we are very disappointed by where we are with immigration reform. But we have to remind ourselves that while we came out in 2012 in record numbers, only 50% of us came out and voted. So what happens so right now they're talking about immigration, but if all 25 million Latinos came out and voted, that would be a completely different conversation. Isn't that right, Ben?
That's correct. I mean, let's be honest here. I mean, the bottom line is we were helped helpful in getting the Latino community out to vote and elected a president. But the president alone cannot make the decisions on how the laws get there. I mean, am I disappointed? Yes, but I'm more upset at the Republicans. They had the best opportunity ever in their hands to pass immigration reform, and they decided to ignore us. Number one. Number two, even if the president is to do what he's going to do after the elections to help, 2 to 3 million people, let's keep in mind that it's going to be only partially resolved, and it's going to be a temporary solution. So again, I mean, I don't believe none of this issue about why we should not be voting is because somebody hasn't done what they say they're supposed to be doing. We need to be voting more to make sure that those people pay attention to our issues. So I believe that wholeheartedly that without participation, we have 25 million people. We expect them this year 7.8 to vote, and that is being optimistic. Isn't that too low?
Yeah, it's almost a little bit over 40%. That's not, and that's
no, but it's ridiculous to expect that we're going to have the political power that we deserve and pay attention to our issues if we don't participate more. So I just think that people like yourselves, Mi Familia Vota, and I'm talking about not Ben Monterroso, Mi Familia Vota, but the hundreds of people and volunteers out there knocking doors. That is why we need to continue doing this work. We're not going to give up. We're not going to be disappointed enough to be staying in the house. As a matter of fact, continue treating us the way we're being treated disrespectfully and not paying attention to our issues. That is the motive for me to continue working as hard as we can do.
Well, and I like your call to arms, so to speak. Is our call is to register and to participate, because two things that we can learn from two groups that have done a phenomenal job is the LGBT community kept hearing the same thing over and over that we're hearing in the Latino community, is that they couldn't move marriage equality forward because it wasn't the political right thing to do, even though behind closed circles Washington was on board. It's the same thing right now when we're talking about immigration reform. What we hear day in and day out is that it's not the political right thing to do. Yet, if you poll the majority of Americans, 68% of Americans, regardless of political stripes, regardless if they're independent, Republican, or Democrat, they all believe that we need to have comprehensive immigration reform. So what that's telling me is that we, at the Latino community, we have to figure out how to do something right, and that is to register as many of us as possible and participate, because at the end of the day, it's up to us to change the politics. With someone who has such a vast readership and of young women and that go across the political spectrum, Michelle, how do we change the politics? How do we get them involved?
Well, I mean, I think that one really concrete and fun way to get them involved is to think about our peers. Like, one thing that really works for us is when we cover millennial women that are sort of kicking ass, as we call it, and there's a lot of really awesome Latinas that are on the ballot this year, and that's something that supporting people like Amanda Renteria in California and Leticia Vanderput in Texas, or any of the, and we're going to do a lot of coverage of this, so if you're wondering who these women are, you should check out cosmoforlatinas.com in the next coming days, or even in the issue that we just published with Rosario on the cover. Well, because when you look at somebody who's just like you, who's like in her 20s, in her 30s, and she's like, look, I didn't have anything, I didn't come from anywhere, but I'm actually going to run for office. I'm going to join the rat's nest of crazy people in D.C. that you all think suck, and I'm going to go in and really try to make a difference. Like, they make entire shows of it. I think there's a Netflix show about that, right? Like, I think people really are interested in what this process means and what it's like, and we're looking for transparency. And really, transparency comes when we get involved and people like us actually try to get to the table, get in front of the president and get in there and be like, I'm going to stand up for immigration reform, or the fact that Latinas are one of the leading groups to get cervical cancer because we don't even have in Texas, we don't have access to a basic health exam that you can get to screen for that kind of cancer. So if healthcare really matters to you, if immigration reform really matters to you, you know what? It all starts in Washington or in your local community and making these laws change for you and really covering that in an interesting way and showing what's at stake. I think going that way and going backwards, that's how you get people to show up on Election Day.
I think that's right. And so all this talk about Election Day, Ben, what can folks expect on the day of election? Sometimes people are registered, but they don't go vote because they think it might be too prohibitive. What what can they expect on Election Day?
Well, let me just, before we go to Election Day, if I may, one of the things that we are working very, very hard is to ensure that our community take advantage. In many of the states, this vote early. In many of the states, vote by mail, because we honestly believe that going to go to work on a Tuesday and then having to go and vote that date is kind of a little bit more complicated. We have noticed that in Arizona, for instance, that the people that are registered to vote by mail, they tend to vote in a greater number, and that helps our community. So, but what they can expect, obviously, each state is a little different, but at most of the states, we want to make sure that the people go out and vote at the proper time, at the proper place. And if you don't know where the location is, please jump into any of the websites, either from Vota Latino or Mi Familia Vota. We have a map there. You can figure it out fairly quickly. We have 800 numbers that you can call to make sure that if you don't know where the location is, you should do it. But what we need to do it is, especially this year when we don't expect a lot of people to go out and vote. I assume that it's going to be in and out. It was not like a 2012.
Well, let's surprise them. Actually, they think that we're not coming, but oftentimes it's because they don't poll us properly. So let's prove them that they're wrong. I think that the Latino community, the best thing for us is when someone says that we can't do it. So let's show them that we can.
I'm talking about us. We're going to be able to do it. I'm definitely committed. I'm excited to see the effort that we're doing. And what I'm talking about is making sure that people go out and vote in the different locations. If you don't know the location, log in into either Voto Latino or Mi Familia Vota website, or call us at 800-888-VOTA, and we'll give you the information where you need to go and vote. But that is what we're looking for people to actually, this year, make sure that we continue proving wrong those who think that we're not going to participate. I mean, this issue about trying to convince some of the people that we are participating is hard, and it's been happening since 1998. It always failed. 2000, you're not going to go out and vote. 2002, the same thing. And every single year, we have gone out to vote in a greater number than the election prior to it, comparison to the same election. So I just think there's going to be another one of those. Be in doubt that we can do it, but we're going to be there for sure. The community needs us, and we know that the community deserves our support.
And in that note, I want to remind everybody that today over 11 states have deadlines. That includes Arizona, Texas, Florida, Georgia, Utah, and Michigan. You'll note that Arizona, Texas, Florida, and Georgia, all very important elections, but they are particularly interesting because the Latino vote can be the deciding factor for congressional and senatorial candidates, but also talking about municipalities, including your school board. So please, today's your last day to register to vote, so please go to latinos2014.com. Register to vote online, print it out, and send it in by tonight to make sure that you're participating. I want to thank so much Ben Monterrosa from Mi Familia Vota, and Michelle Mulligan, thank you so much for joining us as well. I forgot the Herrera. She's going to slap my hand. Michelle Herrera Mulligan, gracias for participating and joining us. No, and I can't stress enough the value of this coalition. Voto Latino, Mi Familia Vota, we basically decided to make Hispanic Heritage Month a month not just to be prideful of our culture, but the power of our vote. And Michelle was one of the first people I called, and not only did she say, I'm on board, but let's get it moving. We have over 85 organizations on board trying to make Hispanic Heritage Month the month of action to flex our political muscle. Sometimes we all need focal points to concentrate. If you'd like to join, please join us at Latinos2014.com. You can learn all about voter registration, all the fun stuff that you can do that you can share with your friends and family. Michelle, I don't know, do you have any last words before we sign off? Ben, do you have any last words?
Michelle?
Well, no, I wanted to say, I guess you've said it best yourself, Maria. We have to get out there. It's really do or die now. So if you haven't registered, register now.
This is for a few states. Today might be the last day to voter registration. Now your job is to ensure that we go out and vote on the election date, and if you have the opportunity to vote early. Those states that we still have a little bit more time, please continue to register to vote. The only way that you're going to get your voices heard, and the only way that we're going to get our community's respect, is by us participating in the civic life of this country. And keep in mind, this is only 2014. We're not stopping here. We need to continue going. In 2016, it's going to be even greater, the effort that we're going to be doing, because now there's going to be more people who are ready to go, and this coalition and these relationships are going to just continue growing. That's what has been proven in the past. So I have nothing but faith. This year we're going to show everybody different that we are going to make the difference here, but at the same time we are building for 2016 and beyond. Thanks.
And let's not forget that Dios ayuda a los que se ayuda. So God helps those who help themselves. I want to send one last shout out to Michelle. Thank you for that fabulous cover of our co-founder, Rosario Dawson. She looks fabulous in Cosmo Latina. And I also want to thank the folks behind the scenes here. I want to thank Yandari and Nicole, who make this every single time possible. And Aaron over there, thank you. And thank you everyone for tuning in. And again, visit latinos2014.com. Take care. Thanks for your time, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.